So Creative Market, as I mentioned, sells design resources, and each week, every Monday, they offer 6 free goods. And usually you can always count on one, if not two fonts being in there, and then the rest, they have various different products. This week they have Lightroom presets, some other elements, couple fonts, and then this frame package that I mentioned. Now, you may want to use all of this stuff or none of it each week. You may not need it at any particular moment, but one thing I would suggest, even if you don't think you're going to need it right away, if you have the space, go ahead and download it. And if you don't have the space, download it during the week that it's available and then delete it from your hard drive so that you don't have any space issues. But what that means is that you've made the purchase, so it will show up in your history. So if at a later point in time you do want to use it, you can go back to your account and you'll see it in your download purchase history, and then you can download it again. So that's one way around it if you're space challenged. In any event, the product I was talking about is this frame and poster set. And so I went ahead and downloaded it and unzipped the file. And what you'll see is there are 4 different JPEGs, and these are the background images they used. And you can use those or not use them. It's up to you. There is a quick README PDF. Not a whole lot in it. There's 2 pages. There's thank you. And then there's some little tips about using the scene creator. I'll try and go over that, but this is in there that may help some people. And there's 3 main files that you want to worry about. There's a frames PSD that's got the 20 different frames, posters with the 9 different posters, and then there's a scene creator that kind of sets up some of the lighting and different effects that you can use. So let's jump into Photoshop and see what's going on. Now in Photoshop, you're going to see a couple different groups, and you're going to probably count and go, well, there are fewer groups than there's actual images or posters. And that's because if you go into some of these groups, you'll see there's both a vertical and a horizontal option. But you probably, if you don't want to click into each and every one of these groups, because that's a lot of clicking, if you want to see everything in this one group, you can hold down the Alt key and click, and it shows you everything in that group. Sorry, I made these bigger so you could see it and forgot to make it wider. And it shows you everything in the group without having to open all the subgroups, which is cool. If you want to close it, hold down the Alt key again and just click again. Say you wanted to just see the top level subgroups in all of these categories and not go through each of them. You hold down the Control key and click Alt, and that will open the top level for each group. Control click again and it closes them all. And if you want to open every blessed group in there, hold down Control and Alt and click. So that's how you get in and out. That's a quick way, because otherwise you're going to sit there and be doing a lot of clicking, and that can get annoying, and I think it's kind of a waste of time personally. So now I've jumped over to the frames image, and as you can see, there's 20 frames in 10 groups, which means that there's going to be a vertical and a horizontal for each one of these. And now you're probably saying, well, I don't want to click in each group and click the eyeball icon on and off to figure out what frames where. This is true. One way to do it is you could use with the move tool selected, and you can either hit V to get the move tool selected or click in your bar, and you can come up top and you can hit auto select and choose group. That way you just click on an image and it will jump to that group, and then you would just choose between vertical or horizontal. So no matter where you clicked, it jumps you to where you need to be. That's one way to do it. I tend not to leave auto select on because sometimes I get really busy or focused and I forget to turn it off. And that can really mess you up when you're working and you're clicking and things are getting selected and you didn't mean to. So I tend to turn auto select off, and then I use a keyboard shortcut to turn it on the fly. And what I mean by that is I hold down the Control key and then I click, and it opens the group I want. And as you can see, it's jumping around. So Control key and then click on the frame you want, and that'll get you to where you want to be. Another option would be to, with your mouse over the frame you're interested in, right click, and all the layers and groups under your cursor at that point with, I can't remember, it's either 5 or 10% visible pixels will show up. In any event, then you can select a group that way. So that's another way to do it. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, I want to use this blue frame. And so I'm going to drag it over to the scene creator so I can show you how that file works. But the reality is you can drag it into any document you want. Documents you're already working on, documents you've created by yourself. You don't have to use the scene creator, but I'm just going to drag it over there so you can see the other features he or she, they put in there. So with that group selected, I'm going to click and drag up to the other tab. And I know I've switched to the new tab because it's switched documents. And I can click down in there. And if I let go, it's basically going to drop it wherever the cursor is. But I want to put it dead center. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key and then let go. And now I'm dead center, which is kind of cool. It came in as a top group, which isn't a big deal, but I'm going to drag it below. I'm going to drag it below the plants just so that the global effects, which I'll show you in a minute, so you'll see what's going on. So I'll put it in between there. I'm going to turn those off. I'll turn all that off for a second. So the first group they have in here is the wall or the background. And what they've done is put each of those 4 JPEGs in there. You can use these on their own. You can use them in combination, change the blend modes. You can add adjustment layers, change the colors, do whatever you want to do. You can drag in your own textures or backgrounds or images or patterns or whatever. You don't have to use these 4, but they just put it in a group to get you started. So let's just say I'm going to use that group. And then in the plans category, I'm going to turn the group on. They have 4 different plans that, if you want those, you may or may not want those. I think they're a little bit cheesy, but that's just me. I mean, you can put your own in there. Again, different things to put on the side. And that's the reason I put the frame down below it, so that if there was any overlap, depending on your frame size, you know, it's going to be behind it, so it looks more realistic. It's not in front of it. Then there's another group that's called Global Effects. And these are, by default, they are locked. So if you want to adjust these, you're going to have to click on the lock icon to unlock them. Once you do that, you go into the group and you're going to see there's a whole bunch of stuff, and you don't have to use any of this, to be honest. You can use it or not use it. And what they have in there, let me see, I'll turn some of these off so we can see what's going on. I'll start with the top one, the FX effects. Geez, I can't say that. And all they've done is just come up with some different coloring options. And honestly, I looked in there and they added new layers and changed the fill and the opacity. And that's one way to do it, but there are easier ways to do that. Personally, I'm a much bigger fan of using adjustment layers because it's a lot fewer clicks. And I'll show that in a second. So that's the effects. Like I said, you can use them or not use them. Shades, they're kind of subtle, but this one adds some shades in the lower left. This one adds shading in the lower right, and if you go in the group, you can adjust that if you want to. Change the color, change the size, make it stronger or lighter. There's a light source. So this one has a center light from the top, and that one's kind of bright. So one thing you could do is change the opacity so it's not so bright. And I'm using a keyboard shortcut. I'm just hitting my numbers on a keypad because I don't want to go up here and change it all the time. But say you wanted to change the color. Instead of doing the way they've done in most of this stuff, adding a new layer and going edit fill, what I would do is add a solid color adjustment layer. And then I would clip that solid color layer to the center light. And what that will do is, now if I want to change the color, I just double click on it and I can instantly see, when I change the color, I can instantly see what's going on. And once I get the color I want, I just hit OK. As opposed to adding a new layer, going to the color picker, picking a color, edit fill. You know, it's a lot less clicks, which is always a good thing. If you don't want the one light source, they have spotlights. So there's 3 lights, left, right, and center. You could use any combination of them or none of the above and change the colors like you did before. There are some vignettes, I guess, that they've added. Again, this wouldn't be my preferred way to do it, but they did and it works. If anybody's really interested, let me know and I could explain a more efficient way of doing that. But I mean, it's nice to see what's in there, so I'm not dissing it. I'll be nice. But that's all in there. And why we're really here is to see how to change it from insert image here, because what's the point if you don't? What we need to do is go into that horizontal group that we drug in earlier, and let's see what's in there. So the first thing in there is a frame, and I open that group, and I'm going to alt click on the frame layer for a second because that will isolate it and you can see what it is. So that's the frame they have in there, and they create a subgroup of colors. They put a few pre-built colors in here, so if you wanted to change the color you could do that. If you didn't like any of these colors, you could always just go in and double click to change it and adjust the color to whatever you wanted. If you're comfortable with hue saturation layers, you can do that. If you'd rather use a channel mixer or color balance, you're more comfortable, you can do it that way, or curves. But the key point is that you're not stuck with the 3 colors they have. You can go in and change them to whatever you need, and that's pretty cool. The next group is the shadow. Let me zoom in here a little bit. And by the way, I'm holding down the space bar and using my left mouse button to move around when I zoom in a lot. But anyway, so there's a shadow. They've made it, let me alt click again to solo it. They kind of made it a permanent layer as opposed to an adjustment layer, but whatever. And then the next layer is the matte. And the cool thing is you can also change this and just go into the effects. And right now they have a gradient overlay on there. You know, you can change that to whatever gradient you wanted to use if you had one. You could also go in and adjust the colors. If you didn't want a gradient overlay, you could do a solid color overlay. And an important little thing in the layer style dialog box that people might not realize is they think that sometimes that all they do is click and you get the adjustments. But the reality is if you click on these, you'll see that your options change too. So always make sure that you're not just clicking here, but then you get your options also. And let me turn off those for a sec. And so then you can go in and change the color and use something from within your document if you want it to match or whatever. So that's an option. You could, even if you wanted to get really crazy, you could go in and add a pattern. Don't think it would work in this particular instance, but I actually could see it working in some cases. So that's another option, but I think we'll just go back to the gradient and call it good. So that's how you change the matte. You could also resize the matte if you wanted to, depending on the size of your image. But the layer you really need to pay attention to is the insert image here. And this is a smart object, and all you need to do is double click to open the smart object. And there's 3, 4, 5, 1,000 different ways to do this. If you wanted to have absolutely no worries at all, I would just create your document at this size. And then you could just drag it in and it'll fit and you'll be good to go. Now, if you don't want to do it at this exact size, depending on the image you're using, with a little resizing, it may still fit. So let me try a couple different ones. I'll try this image. And I'm in Bridge, and I'm going to click on the image, drag down to Photoshop, and drag it in. Now, I bring everything in as a smart object, so Camera Raw opens, and I'm just going to hit OK. It's much larger than that document, and I can't see the transform handles, so I'm going to hit Control 0, and that zooms me out so I can see the transform handles. And I want to resize this both proportionally and from the center. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key and the Alt key so that when I click and drag from a corner, it comes in from the center, which means I have a lot less moving around to do. Now I'm going to hit Control 0 to fit the screen again. And I'm going to do this shift and alt again and get a little closer. That's close enough, and I'll hit OK. Now all I have to do is hit Control S to save, and I go back to the frames, not that frames document, to the scene creator, and there's my image. Do. If you don't want to jump back and forth, you can also hit Control and the Tab key and go back and forth from document to document. But if you want to see them side by side, go up to Window, Arrange, and I like 2-up vertical, so much so that I've even set up a keyboard shortcut. And what that means is that, and you can tell which document is active because the text will be white and bright and bold and the other will be grayed out. So always make sure you're in the right document. I catch myself doing that sometimes. So now I can move this around again if I want and hit Control S, and I can see the changes right away, which is kind of helpful. It saves you a little bit of back and forth, and that's kind of helpful if you want to see what you're doing. Once you're done, or if you don't like it that way, go back to Window and Arrange and consolidate all the tabs. So you're back to the 2 tabs side by side. Once you've put your image in there, you can still go back and change the frame color if you don't like it, if that's not what you wanted. Everything is all still editable. The other cool thing is you don't have to just drag in completed images. Like say you were working in a different PSD file and then you saved out a flattened version. You always keep your PSDs. Please don't even tell me you flatten those. But you don't have to just bring in a JPEG or a PNG or a GIF or whatever. You can bring in a full PSD file. So for example, I'll grab this PSD file I was working on. Same thing, click and drag, bring it in. Control 0, bring it down. This one's not gonna fit. Enter to accept. Let me turn off those other layers. So you could try to do a solid color background, picking a color from the document. That might work. Yeah, maybe not. Or not. You know, if you change the matte color to match, it may work. The other thing you'd probably want to do if your image just isn't going to fit is to change the matte size to cover up that edge. You know, you could also get on the right layer, Julie. You could also move the image to the top, and in your scene creator, when you do change the matte, you know, you could have more in the bottom. Sometimes mattes turn out that way too, so that's another option. But the gist of which is you can play with all of this and change it. You can add to it, and if you do drag in a PSD file, and because it comes in as a smart object, if you see something you want to change, you can just double click to open it and you're in that document with all the layers. And let's see, I'll take this all the way down to where did I start. That's what I started with. Added a few smart filters, added a few other adjustments, and then I had snow. So you can change anything you need to and just save it because it's a smart object. And like I said, you can create your own documents or ones that you're working on, and you can drag the frames in. Like I said, you can drag them into your own document, you can drag them into the scene creator, you can use them wherever. So these frames are actually pretty useful, and it's a pretty nice freebie, all things considered. So I would definitely check it out, download it, even though you may not use it right away, because then it's in your purchase history and you'll have it for later. And if you have any more questions,